In this video, we're going to talk about using external lists for URL filtering. Now, there's a couple of different reasons why you would use an external list as opposed to, say, an internal list. An external list is something that might be updated by somebody else. That somebody else could be somebody such as HR or some other department in your organization that will include a list of URLs to block. In which case you have an extra person in your organization, somebody who's possibly not included in IT, who maintains this list, and then you simply consume it as a resource in order to block resources on it, or to block websites off of it. The other reason why you might use an external list is if you have a specific application from a vendor, in which case they will give you a list of websites that you want to allow. This first option right here is oftentimes referred to as a blacklist, or listing out the items that you can't see. Whereas this option right here, where you're getting to the websites that you can see, this would be a whitelist. HR or some other department giving a blacklist is a very common scenario in many organizations. And then an app vendor also providing a list of websites that should be allowed is also another very common situation in our environment, or in many environments. Now, I have an external list in my scenario. It is actually right here on the DMZ. The way our default configuration is built with the Palo Alto, everything tries to go out through the management interface, which means I have to make sure that the management interface can route up into the firewall itself, and that there's a firewall rule allowing from the inside out to the DMZ. If this was out on the internet, if the block list was out on the internet, then I would want to make sure that I'm able to route to the internet from the management interface, or go through and adjust the service options. Talk about that later. So let's go ahead and look at our environment. So here we have our existing configuration. It's a fairly simple configuration. We have inside to outside right here, source inside, destination outside, with no app URL service or any other restrictions such as that. And then we also have a second rule here of internal to DMZ, inside, destination of DMZ, and again with no restrictions whatsoever. So now that I know I can access my DMZ server, specifically the location I'm looking for is this URL right here, 192.168.50.10 /blocklist.txt. Now this is a list of just websites that I possibly want to block. This could have been from a vendor. This could have been from, an extra security source that defines possibly bad locations for me to go to. Or it could just be from my own HR department wanting to stop people from getting on Reddit. All right, so now that I have this, now I want to just import this into my Palo Alto as an additional list that I can then use to block traffic. So go back to our firewall here, and the block lists are objects. So we'll go off to an object. This isn't exactly a block list. What we want is an external list. And so if we scroll down on the left-hand side here, we'll see right here is an external dynamic list. It's external to the Palo Alto and is dynamic because it's constantly being updated. We can see there's a couple of dynamic IP lists that are created automatically by Palo Alto. I'll go ahead and minimize those, and then I'll just say add. I'll go ahead and give this a name. We'll call this unwanted websites. Yeah, sure. The type, it's not an IP list. It is actually a URL list. It's going to be a list of URLs. And then the source, well, the source is going to be this right here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and then paste it right here. If I need some sort of a server authentication, some way of being able to authenticate to the remote source to be able to say who I am, I can use a certificate profile. Otherwise, I just specify how frequently I want to update it. So you have anywhere from 5 minutes up to monthly. I'll say 5 minutes. We'll assume that this is a fairly critical run. Now, before I click test source, I'm actually going to say OK. And commit the change here. I'm doing this before I test the source because sometimes the testing of the source works fine at that point, and sometimes it doesn't work until I committed it. So I just got into the habit of always committing the change before I test the source. There we go. So now I come back in here to my unwanted websites. I'm going to click test source URL. It's the firewall is going to go out to that website and is going to try to download the file. It says, yes, it is accessible. Let's see, has the list been populated? The list has not yet been populated. So let's go ahead and OK. With it still highlighted, I'm going to click the import now button. That will queue up the process to import the files or import the configuration, which it would have done automatically in 5 minutes anyway. Okay, so now that I have a list of URLs or a list of websites that I want to block, still not populated, it'll come up shortly. Now I can go ahead and I can configure my security policy. So for that, we go back to policies. I'm going to go ahead and just clone my outside facing policy. And I'm going to put this up to the top. And then we'll go ahead and edit that. I'll call this block websites. And source, destination, all still the same. Application still the same. Under URL category, I want to add in a new URL category. And I can see I have my external dynamic list right there for my unwanted websites. So I choose that. And then under actions, I change from allow to deny. Now remember, because this is a firewall and the firewalls run from the top down, it's going to see this rule, and if it's one of those URLs, it's going to block it. If it's not one of those rules, it will go on to the next if it's not one of those URLs, it will go on to the next rule and then most likely be accepted. So before I commit that, let's actually make sure that this works. Let's see. Reddit.com. What else was there? Gizmodo.com. And AVS Forum. All right. So just 3 general websites. They could be most anything that we possibly want. But they're currently coming through. So let me go ahead and commit this final change. And once the commit is in there, then we should be able to go back to those websites and try to refresh them. And they should fail because of the fact that we are now blocking the traffic and denying access to those URLs. Let's see, Gizmodo immediately gave an error. AVS Forum and Reddit are trying. Let's see if I... It might still take a minute for the rules to populate. So there you go. There's the various rules or the lists that we included in there. You could add in additional exceptions. And then, like I said, these dynamic lists can be used for a lot of things, for both allowing access as well as denying access. You could even then put in some sort of a QoS policy of, here's some websites that are positive for the organization. Here's some that aren't quite as positive. Therefore, I'll put QoS for the various resources. You can use these lists in pretty much any policy where you have URLs defined.